After Iran unleashed wave after wave of large-scale missile strikes on strategic targets in Israel, hitting multiple cities and critical military sites, the United States responded immediately as its ally came under attack. American cruise missiles slammed into an Iranian naval destroyer in the Persian Gulf, leaving it engulfed in flames before it sank into the deep. Subsequent strikes then hit oil storage sites along Iran's coast. The fuel tanks erupted in a series of explosions, sending giant fireballs into the sky that were visible for miles. Simultaneously with the air campaign against Iran, full combat mobilization orders were issued across all military branches at bases throughout the greater Middle East region. Every combat-ready unit received the order to move from emergency alert to immediate battle readiness. At the military airfield of a base in the Middle East, the tension was written all over the soldiers' faces. Two heavy-lift CH-53 Stallion transport helicopters stood on the runway, rotors spinning, fully prepared for combat. The ground crew kept their distance from the blast of the spinning rotors. Inside the operations room, the helicopter pilots went over their equipment, making sure nothing was missing. They wore high-end flight suits, survival vests, checked their personal sidearms, and pulled on their flight helmets. Near the aircraft, the Marines had formed into two groups, one assigned to each helicopter. The soldiers were carrying full combat loads: body armor, helmets, rifles, magazines, grenades, radios, water, and rations. When the order came, the first group moved out and boarded the lead CH-53 through its side door. Just off to the side on the same airfield, a CH-47 Chinook was being loaded with supplies and equipment for a separate mission. The Marines filed aboard through the rear ramp and settled into their positions inside the cargo bay. Under the helicopter, the ground crew hooked an artillery gun onto the external cargo sling. It was a towed howitzer, which the Chinook would carry dangling beneath the aircraft. After the suspension system was checked and the load was firmly secured, the helicopter lifted off with the gun hanging below and flew low over the landscape toward a military base. On approach, the Chinook descended, while the crew chief guided the pilot lower until the howitzer touched down. The sling hook was released, leaving the gun in place. The helicopter then shifted to a nearby landing point, set down, and the Marines poured out through the rear ramp. They moved straight to the artillery piece, unloaded its ammunition, and began establishing a firing position at once. The artillery trails were extended. The support legs were driven deep into the earth. The sighting system was installed, and the rounds were stacked in readiness. As evening closed in, two more helicopters arrived at a separate forward site, bringing in additional Marines. The aircraft touched down in a flat, open clearing, with no buildings, no cover, and no protection. The Marines climbed out and dispersed quickly. Night was falling fast. There were no tents, no shelters, and no facilities whatsoever at this position. This was a raw, improvised field position in the middle of open terrain. The Marines set up a defensive perimeter, positioned their squad weapons at critical points to dominate the most likely approaches, and posted sentries. Some started digging shallow foxholes. Others spread their gear across the ground. Sleeping bags, ponchos, and ammunition kept close at hand. They ate cold rations and drank from their canteens as the temperature began to fall. They were about to spend the night on open ground, with nothing overhead but the sky. All through the night, helicopters carried out repeated resupply missions to the position. Flying blacked out, they used night vision gear to navigate to the camp. Every run brought in more equipment, ammo crates, extra anti-tank weapons, mortar tubes and mortar rounds, radio batteries, and medical supplies. They plotted fields of fire and marked the best possible ambush positions. Every detail was documented and sent back to the command post at the camp. The sniper teams moved into high ground with a clear view of the surrounding area. They unzipped their rifle cases, deployed their bipods, and laid out their equipment, spotting scopes, rangefinders, wind meters, and notebooks. One man settled in behind the trigger, while the other scanned the terrain around the position through the optic. They studied the ground with methodical discipline, sweeping one section after another, marking ranges to terrain features, identifying likely targets, and writing down every movement they saw. Not far away, the infantry squads were already deep into combat drills. They practiced bounding across exposed ground, one team moving while the other laid down cover, then reversing roles in a seamless rhythm of fire and movement. Next came breach and clear drills, bunkers, buildings, rooms, stack on the door, blow it open, flood inside, clear the dead space, call the threat. No wasted motion, no hesitation. They trained to move through low ground as well, slipping along dry creek beds and dirt cuts to avoid observation. Every step was taken, hunched over or crawling low. Their priorities were simple: move fast, stay silent, stay unseen. The squad leaders watched every repetition, stopping them, correcting them, and forcing them to do it again, until every man could cross open ground without hesitation, without sound, and without exposing his position. Then the fire teams drilled their immediate reactions, how to respond when shots came from the front, from the flank, or from a concealed ambush. The Marines withdrew back to camp. Their weapons were cleaned, their gear was checked, and defensive positions remained in place. They waited for the real order to come. If the combat alarm sounded, every man would know exactly where to go and what role to perform. Everything that had taken place up to that point had been a full-scale readiness exercise, preparing the force for a possible deployment if higher command gave the order.